Everybody, Jason Klom with the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. I am doing one comedy album a day. That is to say, I'm listening to one comedy album a day for all of 2017. So hashtagging it comedy album a day to help spread the word about it. You should do it too, actually. Go ahead, do it. Send them to me. I want to know what people are listening to. I might just do the album you do because it helps me choose. Although, most of the point of this is to get through the shitload of comedy albums that I have. Just to listen to them. This time I've picked, so when I was in Kalamazoo, Michigan for a wedding a few months back, I went to Satellite Records, which is an amazing record shop. I'm sure it's great for people who like music. I mean, I like music, but for people who are hunting for obscure and interesting music. But I found some awesome comedy stuff, as well as some like local comedy stuff and some more obscure comedy stuff that I probably wouldn't find anywhere. Now that said, the person I'm picking is very popular in a world that's not something I'm familiar with or used to. This is Wendy Bagwell, This, That, and the Other. And look closely, the most unusual thing that struck me first is that it's a gentleman named Wendy. Now, I've never seen that before. That's interesting, number one. He was a gospel singer, but this is a collection of his comedy bits that he would do in between songs. And actually, you'll hear a lot of the intros and outros. It's either he's just come out of a song or he's just going into a song. The interesting thing, the reason, like I say, he's bigger in a world than I'm familiar with. I don't know much about gospel music or comedy that might be in that world. One of his stories, which is on here, it's called "Here Come the Rattlesnakes." I've seen it listed. That's how it's listed. I'm sorry, didn't mention this album's from 1970. That's fun. There's a siren. That is a million-selling single. Here Come the Rattlesnakes. Okay, that's how big it was. This is, again, I'm going off of Wikipedia, and citation needed maybe, but it does seem to. He was big, and it's fascinating. It's interesting. Now, when you listen to it, it's the first word that comes to mind if you are a city slicker, a bit of a city mouse like myself. Now, I come from the country. It's very quaint. That's the first word that you hear. It's like a not honed, not maybe a less sophisticated, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, version of an Andy Griffith. It's a country bumpkin, and he calls himself a bumpkin, or some word equivalent to that. And it's just his stories of life. There's he stammers a bit like Senator Claghorn on the old Jack Benny show, or Foghorn Leghorn. He uses the word honey a lot. Honey, I tell you, and it's a joy to listen to him tell a story, even if I'm not laughing. And if I'm honest, like as far as like my style of humor, I don't really laugh that much on it. It is very much like, this is for a church audience. This is people who would be listening to, I like gospel music fine, but people who would be listening to it would also be comfortable hearing these songs in between songs about Jesus Christ. He talks about the Lord a lot, unabashedly, which is fine. I don't judge that at all, of course. But it is interesting to hear that in a mix of comedy. And when typically if you hear somebody that's like mixing faith with their art, this is the kind of stuff you have to do. It's going to be safe. That's going to be what it's like. There are a few things that are of the time. Like I say, it's 1970. This cover looks older. His hair definitely looks older than that. And his style of telling stories and the sort of type of bumpkin he's portraying, which does actually seem very legitimate and it's very sweet, is a little old-timey. So there are a few things where it's like, he's being self-deprecating, but there's some times when it just comes across as it's a less sophisticated version of self-deprecating and kind of playing up the character of who you are and where you're from. Again, it's Andy Griffith without the work behind it. This is a guy just telling stories between music, and clearly it is released on Canaan Records, or Canaan. I'm so sorry. I'm assuming it's Canaan Records. They did gospel recordings. So they're like, hey, you tell all these stories. Let's do something with them, especially after Here Come the Rattlesnakes does so well. The stories are interesting. Okay, they're well-told stories, and they're very country, and they're very American. They're super American, the way they're told. I was thinking about what is different about this than what I'm used to hearing. Comedians tend to be people who want to be people of the world, no matter where they're from. That is the reason why, if you're from a small town, even if you're a local comedian, a lot of people travel and they want to be worldly. That is a thing about comedians. This is a guy who is clearly comfortable in his own world, made money in his own world, sold 1 million copies of a record in his own world. So his form of storytelling is very country and very American in that way. It's very unique. It can't be very unique. It's unique. It's its own thing. And that is the most interesting part about it. And if you listen to it, if it were me, if I'm going to recommend what to listen to, I'd say listen to side 2. Here Come the Rattlesnakes is fine, but side 2 is pretty interesting. But before you get there, if you read up on him, he's interesting. He's a decorated Marine. He adopted his abused nephew to help save him. Like a really fascinating, interesting guy. And that will soften your heart a little bit if you're maybe bored, or it's not your style, or one or two things might seem sexist. It's honestly, for 1970, it's pretty tame compared to other stuff, because he's a guy who clearly is passionate about his faith, and so being nice is behind everything he does, so I actually respect that. The best story on here is called Picking Up Pawpaws, and it's really sweet. It's really genuine. It's vulnerable. And there's this guy who, he's not super masculine or anything, but he's a religious guy. He's got to portray a certain image. And to talk about being vulnerable and being cast in his first play and being so excited, it's just as much, it's as good or interesting a story as you've ever heard of anybody going into entertainment for the first time. It's adorable, and it's sweet, it's well told, all the characters are well laid out. I like it a lot. So I think it's worth looking for. I'm sure you can find this stuff on YouTube. I have zero idea if this is out of print or not. Again, I got this for $2 at Satellite Records in Kalamazoo. And I don't know. I think it's fun to listen to. There's some weird, interesting, just some weird things going on technically that I don't know how they happen. There are 2 tracks that are clearly from the same show where the audience sounds like an old-timey radio sound of a storm. Like, you can hear it's kind of people laughing, but it sounds like as he's talking. It's one of the weirdest things I've heard. What I'm guessing is it was an old-timey mic, maybe a diaphragm mic that didn't pick up the audience. They didn't mic the audience, and then they added in some canned laughter on top, because he's telling these stories very naturally, not like a man on a stage or in a studio, that is. So it seems like these are all actually live. There's some funny stuff in it. It's very countrified. There's a lot of stuff in there where he's using some terms that you're not going to hear in your typical stand-up album. He makes a mistake. Said, "Have my nose fixed, now my mouth won't work." It doesn't make any sense, but it's cute, and it's, again, very self-deprecating, and I appreciate that. It's fun to listen to. I would stick to side 2, and if you're going to stick to one track, look up Picking Up Pawpaws. It's very cute. It's not the tightest comedy in the world. It's a story. It's debate. This is called a comedy album, but it's a story album. And again, the first thing I can think of is an Andy Griffith or maybe a Bill Cosby with less of the context. So something you can actually enjoy. Specifically that Picking Up Pawpaws. It's very cute. It's enjoyable, and I'm interested in knowing more about this guy. I don't know how much information there is about him out there, but Wendy Bagwell, This, That, and the Other, 1970. Comedy album a day, if you would, hashtag it, comedy album a day. And that's about it. Listen to the Comedy on Vinyl podcast, please. I'm Jason Klom. Thanks so much for watching, and have a good thing.